Okay, we'll officially open the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting for the 8th of June, 2022. Welcome, everybody. We've got quite a hefty agenda. I hope everybody enjoyed their extra day over the weekend so as to read that entire Strategy and Policy agenda. So I know that it was a big lot of papers and information to get through, so I appreciate everybody doing that and joining us today. So we've good on you. So we've got decision papers on items 5 through 9, and I think we're going to just try and play it by ear a little bit as to when we're going to be able to take a break. It'd be nice to be able to get through the first 3 decisions and then aim to take a break around 11 o'clock. So hopefully we can do that. And aiming to finish about, do we think we'll, I'm not going to jinx it. I ain't going to jinx it. I'm not going to call it. All right. So apologies, we'll move on to apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Litchwork and Councillor Mahuta. Any other apologies who would like to put forward? You have no mic there. So was that a early leaving early or? Nice. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Remington. Do I have a mover for those apologies? Barry, in a second. Dennis, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda.
I so move.
Councillor Remington, second. Councillor McPherson, all those in favor? Carried. Disclosures of interest. Any additional disclosures or disclosures related to the items on the agenda today? No. I assume somebody's watching chat online. All right, so no disclosures. So the first item is item 4.1. This is the minutes of the submissions subcommittee. This was the submission on the natural hazards insurance bill, which was that submission was lodged the afternoon after that subcommittee meeting. So I'm happy to move that those Section A items are for noted. Seconded by Councillor Strange. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right. First big ticket item, coastal plan. Been a long time coming. 14 workshops and counting. But I think we're there. I'm feeling positive. I shouldn't speak too soon. Would you like to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Morning, councillors, those in the room, those online. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a rinse and repeat of the agenda item that you received on the 3rd of May committee. The decision was made at that committee to defer the putting the plan out for targeted engagement, so for the reasons stated at that committee. Since then, we had the council workshop with all councillors in attendance on the 18th of May. No new issues were raised for us other than those that had been raised at the committee. We addressed those. I will pass it over to David and Chris shortly to identify where the amendments from the committee were made in the plan. The plan is a separate attachment in the agenda today. And that's really so people are able to find it easily and identifiably online. Subsequent to the workshop, staff had and our ecologists had a separate meeting with Councillor Litchwork where we spent some time going through and understanding a bit more and using some maps and some Sharpie pens to understand more some issues around the Whangaroa Harbour. So the one matter that I would like to draw attention to, and I know David and Chris will talk to this a bit more is the National Environmental Standard for fresh water. We had a exposure draft released on the, I'm going to say the 31st of May. As members may recollect, there was some issues there around the NES for freshwater and how it refers to wetlands in the coastal environment. And the soundbite is, while there is a pre-exposure draft, it doesn't address the issue of wetlands in the coastal environment, and we understand the government's likely to put something out in July on that matter. Staff are presently working through the exposure draft on the NES freshwater management with a view to getting a submission subcommittee to see if in fact it's needed, because the main matter that I guess gives us concern was the definition of coastal wetlands. As I said, we can't see that in the draft, the exposure draft, so we're likely to see that next month. As you'd anticipate, there's a fairly short timeline for any comments into the exposure draft of the NES freshwater management, so we've only just got our hands on that and we'll be scheduling something in. But Chris and David, Madam Chair, will take you through the item in more detail. Over to them.
Morning, councillors. Great to be at this point, and hopefully I think you'll be satisfied with the end product, at least to go out for consultation with those key stakeholders that we have talked about. So just in the last couple of weeks, the team have been working on how we communicate the draft plan, subject to your decision this morning, and just securing who those stakeholders are, as well as how we're engaging with our non-statutory stakeholders. And so part of that is the discussion document that we talked around the further marine protection options. We have made some changes to that in recognition of the workshop held on the 18th of May. And at that workshop, we did talk about the National Environmental Statement standards for freshwater. We also talked about estuaries and how the biodiversity values might be affected in any changes to those. So as a result of the meeting with Councillor Litchwark, there is a little bit of refinement around Schedule 7 that will be occurring. At the moment, we have the planning maps, and so the URL, the link to the planning maps that we have given you previously, we have that now about to go live. That will be available to the general public, again, subject to any decisions you make this morning. And those maps now also include the prohibited mooring areas. So there was a slight update to those. Otherwise, the plan is near identical to the version you saw previously. The two key changes that we have made, and we have got a little presentation on a couple of points. The two key changes that we have made is we have updated the biodiversity policy and method in relation to the further marine protection options. So that's policy Eco 10 and method 1. So again, that's to reflect the feedback that staff heard during the workshop on the 18th of May. The other key changes that we have made in response to, again, some of the feedback from the workshop is we've just refined the policies that deal with livestock in the CMA. So that provides clarity. It also picks up on discussions that we subsequently had with the RUD team around the interpretation of Rule DDR4 and Rule DDR8. So that's the circumstances in which stock may be allowed to be moved within the coastal marine area, and then the prohibited rule which prevents stock from grazing or disturbing the coastal marine area. So those are the two key changes. Other than that, the document is in essence what you have seen previously. So just William, just if we just quickly just rattle through the couple of slides, because I would just like to touch on the timeline. Again, as Tracy has said, this is largely a rinse and repeat. We've ensured that the plan does follow the national planning standards. So that means that we are bound by the structure of those planning standards, which have been discussed with MFE and with the Department of Conservation. The format of the plan is to split the plan up into topics and to follow the requirements of the national planning standard when it comes to how we name chapters, for example. So we are governed that by a little bit. The other key part is the Tauranga Whenua team and Miriana Titai have met with Councillor Mahuta and gone through some of her comments that she had. As a result, she's got a level of comfort with the plan as it currently stands, and obviously very keen on the further feedback that we will get from iwi. So we're now moving into, again, subject to today, moving into that phase of engagement and quite an intense period of engagement with area authorities again over the next 6 weeks. Just next slide, William. So consultation has occurred with all the statutory agencies to date. So we have had feedback on the plan and on the issues and how a number of those agencies see the plan being presented in terms of the issues or the concerns to them. We have also had quite an extensive period over the last 3 years of engagement with the community. So you will recall that was back in late 2019 and 2020, where we had online meetings as well as face-to-face meetings. So those occurred in Whitianga and Raglan and Kawhia. From that, we developed the policy directions papers in May last year, and that helped inform the direction and some of the options that staff presented over the past 14 workshops to you for your direction, and again reflected that direction in the draft document. I think the key, again, just to emphasise, is that it is a draft, so we are wanting feedback. We then want to take that feedback back to you for you to make the decisions on the plan that ultimately will be notified for formal submissions. Next slide, William. So just a recap that we have had the high-level legal review. There are some matters that have been raised that we will be picking up on, and Simpson Grierson will be undertaking a detailed full review of the plan once we have the external stakeholder feedback. So that's programmed in to commence at the end of July and during August. The National Environmental Standards for Freshwater. We have, and I do have a slide on this, from the exposure draft, some direction from MFE. And that direction is largely, as Tracy has said, that we will now have a decision from MFE or from the Minister in July. So we'll know where we stand on coastal wetlands. That will then inform the plan and we can make suitable changes to it in response. And then the further marine protection, we do have Mike Townsend here as the team leader of science. If we do have any questions around this particular matter, but I think from the workshop, staff have very clear direction. We are seeking feedback. We're going to go out to around 200 stakeholders, including fishing groups, including Greenpeace and Legacy, and other public and community groups to get their feedback on, in particular, should we include areas that may have restrictions or limitations on the taking of plants and animals, may have restrictions around fishing activities, and we have suggested in the discussion document that Mercury Islands may be a suitable area. So again, picking up on the councillor feedback that they would like, or you would like, to have that area identified. Coupled with the discussion document is we have a survey that will also go out. That survey will be by registration, and again, that's to ask questions around those further marine protection options. Again, we'll bring that survey back to you at a future workshop, so you'll, I guess, have some further information in which to make decisions on the proposed plan. William, just the last couple of slides. Just for interest, sorry, we may have, that's the one, thank you. Hopefully that's readable. This has come out of the exposure draft, which landed on our desks overnight last Wednesday. I just thought it'd be worth including word for word what they put in that report. So this is essentially their holding pattern. It certainly sounds like there will be efforts to define what a natural coastal wetland is, and we'll have hopefully the answer around that in July. Chris State, as the team leader for the policy team, is part of the working group looking at how that might be impacted in terms of the coastal plan. And I dare say the submission itself will go through the normal channels. So just for information, that's in essence what we've received to date, and the further intel that Brent Sinclair has provided around the July date for a decision, or at least some information on what that definition may be. And then just the last slide, William, which is just the updated timeline, which we did share at the workshop, just showing that at this stage we have scheduled a workshop for the 30th of August. We anticipate probably need more than one workshop, but if we can just tackle things in bite-sized chunks, and I guess the first step is to get that feedback from stakeholders and then come back to you with a summary of the stakeholder feedback and discussion on the key points around the development of the proposed plan. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair, and happy to answer any questions between myself and Chris and the rest of the team.
Great, thanks for that that summary and taking us through where changes have been made and reflected in the document that's before us today. We've got a question online from Councillor Kneebone.
Thanks, Madam Chair. David, noting what you just told us, that slide about the clarifications or the process underway to clarify exactly what a wetland is, would that suggest that we are likely going to have to make some amendments around activity status for lots of things?
Through you, Madam Chair, we're unsure at this stage. We suspect the impact may be a lot less than we were initially led to believe. So that is something we are looking at. The standards themselves relate to earthworks, drainage activities, the typical wetland activities that you would see on land. So how that translates into the coastal marine environment will depend very much on what their definition is. It certainly will relate to some of disturbance activities. And again, the extent of that really will depend on how their definition pans out.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Chair.
All right, any other, Councillor Tagg.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I noticed there was a marked up copy flowing out of the legal review. So will those suggested changes be made before or after it goes out to the public? You know, any changes that you consider necessary?
If you leave yours on all the time. There we go.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so Councillor Tagg, in response, we haven't made most of those changes at this stage because we were aware that councillors had seen the earlier version and we didn't want to make changes without you being aware of those. So most of those changes haven't been made. Where it's a minor edit, we have made those changes, however. So the version that we're putting out for public comment, the intention is that over the next 2 months, we will include changes as a result of the high-level review and then also the more comprehensive review once that's undertaken as well. And we'll bring those changes back to you in a manner that you can certainly see where things have been changed.
A second question, and Tracy's already partly responded to this relating to the definition of the Ramsar International Wetland. So I'm just putting myself in the shoes of I'm a member of the public, and I'm saying, well, if I'm in a Ramsar wetland, there are different rules that might apply within that. How do I know where the boundaries of that are? Where do I go in the plan to find that information?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and Chris may be able to help me with this. We have identified the Firth of Thames Ramsar site as its own sub-A area, and we do have rules that specifically relate to activities within that area that are, I guess, in essence, non-complying or prohibited for some activities. So we have given those a higher status than other areas that have been identified as significant, primarily because that area does have Ramsar significance. And so certainly the Ramsar site on the planning maps is identified as part of the significant Indigenous biodiversity A areas. But we could make that more explicit.
So I'm still not quite sure. So you've got the A and B biodiversity areas, but the Ramsar wetland boundaries are different from those, maybe more restricted in a way. But there are different rules apply only if you're in the Ramsar wetland. So I'm aware that Ramsar has its own map. So is that map going to be made available so people know where those rules apply?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Teagan, it's when we have so many different types of legislative protection in the coastal marine area, it does get a little confusing, but there will be areas that are protected under different legislation, such as marine reserves, the recommended areas for protection as part of revitalising the Gulf and the Ramsar site. They will be, where they are identified and protected in a schedule due to their values, such as Indigenous biodiversity or other, that will be indicated clearly through both the maps and the schedules whether you are in a Ramsar site or a marine reserve or a area protected under other legislation. And I do agree that we do need to make that, agree with David, we do need to make that clearer in the draft maps.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy, I think Tracy.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think ultimately when the plan is finalised, and that's a good couple of years away yet, my vision, I guess, is to have the maps and the entire plan in an app form, very similar to for anybody who uses Marine Mate. You know, you don't know when you're out on the water if you're crossing boundaries or where you're coming. So ultimately, if we take the mapping to its zenith, you will be able to have an app that will show you where you are, hopefully provide as much clarity as we can provide. One thing that I think we will look at, and it was something I was thinking about last night, just with Ramsar, while the coastal plan stops at Main High Water Springs, obviously the Ramsar site extends beyond that. So being able to say, so that anybody's trying to understand the map, look, this is the boundary for this plan, but there are other rules. And sorry, for those councillors who aren't aware, Ramsar are sites that are identified wetlands that are of international value. I think there's probably 5 in the country, and there's an area northward of the Kapuatai Peak Dome going into the Firth of Thames. That's a identified Ramsar site in our region.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, David. What's the word to use? The washing of the Motiti decision through this document you referred to was the Eco M1. I go to Eco M1 and it refers to Schedule 7C. I go to 241 to look for Schedule 7C, no Schedule 7C. That tells me that we're going to go out, get some consultation, talk to people about how this council has interpreted the Motiti decision. I'm assuming we will have some sort of conversation that says there are elements within the council that are concerned about benthic disturbance and not having the tools to stop it. And what will flow from that feedback will fill up 7C. Is that what I'm hearing? And that when that comes back to us, it'll be dished up as a fait accompli. Have I got that right?
Not quite. Through you, Madam Chair, the intent with the discussion document and with the survey is to bring that information back to you as councillors to then make that decision around the content of 7C. So whether that includes the Mercury Islands, whether it includes a number of sites, whether it includes no sites. What we've done at the moment in response to the councillor, largely consensus, but not wholly consensus, is to test the waters around the policy and the method, and whether we have sites which are protected by further mechanisms in the plan than what we currently have. So I think it's really important to remember that we do have protection already under the RMA with Schedule 7C. Schedule 7, with identification of the Sub A and B sites. So that does mean there are tougher consenting requirements. For example, we're prohibiting certain activities within sub areas, and there are tougher tests. But the question is, for those activities that is disturbing the benthic environment, should the coastal plan manage those activities or control those activities or prohibit them? And so that's what we will bring back to you. We'll bring you back that feedback for the councillors to make that collective decision around the content of 7C.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, those islands in the Gulf, in the inner Gulf, are sub areas, correct? The ocean around them?
Sorry, which islands in particular?
Well, the Northern Gulf, for example, off Colville.
A number of the islands are, yes.
My second question is about, I sent you some pictures of the hard structure used at Kopatoaki to protect that urupā. And Director May has answered a question that I posed to her. I gave her 2 questions. I've got faith that although it won't be easy, aligned communities will be able to put together a case for the use of hard structures as part of a climate adaptation strategy. So I'm pretty pleased to hear that. But then I went to think about, well, if we are going to protect urupā with hard structures, I can't imagine that there's going to be the same galvanising of energy and abilities and money to be able to do that. So I then go looking to page 207 and I think, maybe it's covered in heritage sites. And then and unfortunately, I've been a bit of a dinosaur. I haven't done it electronically. I've done it all with the papers. Looks like, looking around the table, I'm in good company too. So I go to page 207 and I'm thinking maybe one of those, that urupā Kopatoaki, which is very prominent, is one of these defined sites. And I don't think it is, but is it? Is the Cope urupā in these historic sites?
So through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is it isn't. What we have done is we have taken out most of the urupā and wahitapu areas that are on land because we want to have some direct discussion and engagement with iwi authorities on whether those sites are included. So they are on land at the moment and technically not part of the coastal plan because they're not in the coastal marine area, but we recognise that over time they may well do. So that's something we want to test with the iwi authorities. So saying this is the information that we are aware of, should this information be included in the plan? So I know that there's a range of views around whether urupā should be protected or allowed to erode. So some sites, the iwi view and mana whenua view is that they should be left to natural processes. And any ko-iwi are then, re-interned or, following due process around remains. So it is a case-by-case basis. But again, that's something we can bring back to you once we've undertaken that further engagement.
Well, David, with all due respect, that's a really interesting answer, because if you look at that urupā and those photos I sent you, the diverted energy that's coming around the back of that hard wall structure clearly tells me that that's going to be in the sea before too long, because they did not complete the hard structure to protect that urupā. So to say that it's on the land, so we'll go and have a consultation, I'm struggling with that, because the iwi mana whenua have already signalled in their attempts at putting hard structure around that urupā what's important to them, and it's now sticking out into the bay. And my fear is that they will be caught unable to continue the hard structure because of what we've put in the plan and the need for them to be, as I described before, a committed, aligned community that have resources and skills and are prepared to go through the regulatory requirement to get protection. My worry is it'll be too hard, too complex, too expensive for them to do what clearly they've signalled to us they want to do because of their attempts at the hard structure already. So I just wonder if we're being permissive enough.
We'll go to Tracy.
Yeah, Madam Chair, look, as David said, we've taken out those matters, those areas, Urupā, Wahitapu, Koiwi interment sites, that we know of, to have that conversation direct with iwi. And I think that is the right thing to do. I think what is important is the plan can't really distinguish whether it's is unable to distinguish whether it's an urupā or a private cemetery, of which there may be some around the coast. So what I think is important is understanding just how far this plan can go. The trick of, once the plan is in, it's going to be in for 10 to 15 years, and we know that the coast will be the coast over that time. But we have to look at what are the effects from the activity, be it an urupā or a private cemetery. I think what is key is if it's a matter of funding, if it's a matter of willingness, there are opportunities available and funding mechanisms that present themselves to help both iwi and those who may have private or public cemeteries around the coast through Minister of Culture and Heritage, and also through some funds for iwi who, as David said, wish to protect their urupā, because not all do. Now, some have sent that signal in terms of starting the hard structures in some way, shape or form, but others also want to engage with us to understand better, what the likelihood is of some of those sites remaining. So for us, I guess it was a matter of respect and wanting to have the direct conversation with iwi authorities first and then bring that back. We may see a lot more sites being in the schedule. We have to have those conversations with those people about those sites. It will be interesting to see if there are any European historical sites and what feedback we get there.
Thank you. What I'm hearing you say is that if you will go and talk to the people at COPE, and if they express an interest in carrying on their hard structures, there will be under this plan some methodology to allow them to do that.
Madam Chair, I don't think I was quite as emphatic as that. We will have the conversation, we'll bring the outputs of that conversation back to you for your guidance.
Sorry, Madam Chair, to be a nuisance, but it's really important to me that the executive go and have a consultation with the community at corporate Tauaki. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And I'm sure that that's been heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yes. Now, I note that Fred isn't present at the moment, but you did say that over the last couple of weeks that you have had conversations with him. I just wondered if you could specifically go through and explain to us, seeing we weren't present at the time, which of the specific concerns that he raised, that he specifically wanted to talk to you about, which of those have been addressed, because I note that you say there haven't been many changes within the plan. So if you have addressed some of those concerns, if you could explain what they are, and if you haven't, could you explain why you haven't? That would be really useful.
If I can lead off there, Madam Chair, I just want to be very specific. The team sat down with Fred to understand more essentially of some of the biodiversity around Whangaroa Harbour. Fred didn't raise any other issues other than what he had previously raised through emails, and it wasn't an opportunity to essentially relitigate any issues that he had with the coastal plan, because he felt as though all the matters he had raised had been addressed. But it was an opportunity for the team to sit down and understand more some of those sites of importance to Fred in the Whangaroa Harbour. So there was no conversation around the substantive plan, as Councillor Litchfield had all the questions that he had asked answered. So I just want to be clear there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, if you are interested, I can show you the, we sat down with Fred and a large aerial map of Whangaroa Harbour, and he told us where he had seen various fauna and flora and fauna in the coastal marine area that he considers significant. We fed this through to our biodiversity consultants, and we're going to have a meeting hopefully early next week to work out how this can be incorporated into our mapping. Because it is related, it is confined to Whangaroa Harbour, it's something that we should be able to put in without too much of an issue, but it has got to go through that filter that we've put the rest of our biodiversity through, so we get consistent identification across the region.
Yeah, so just also to add, so that was picking up all the information that Fred had, which is robust, evidence-based, drawing on the maps of Whangaroa Harbour and identifying what the values are and the science information to support that. And that will go through the ecologists and will be added into Schedule 7. So I think that was a very successful, I think it was about 3 hours with Fred downloading that information to Chris and Mike and the team.
So was Fred happy with all of that at the end? Was there anything that he was still unhappy with?
Let's see, Fred was very happy before, during and after that meeting from what we could gather.
Okay, that's good to know. And there was just one other question that I had, and that was just in terms of what you had up on the screen, I think it was before, where it was talking about the targeted consultation. Just wanted to know, within the targeted consultation, will that include recreational coastal groups in terms of recreational fishermen, or will it include that? But also, if people put in submissions who are not part of groups that we have identified, will those submissions be treated in the same way that the ones that come in from other areas that we have targeted?
No, very good question. At this stage, what we had planned, which we communicated at the last couple of workshops, is we will be doing wider engagement around the further marine protection options. So it won't be identifying specific individuals, but it'll be identifying those groups. So it is the fishing groups, it is the environmental groups, the harbour care groups, asking their opinions around the further marine protection options. Throughout the whole, I guess, process and timeline, we've always talked about the engagement on the draft plan and seeking feedback would be with the statutory agencies only, because of the tight timeframes. However, we have extended the engagement to include the likes of Forest and Bird, Federated Farmers, EDS, for example, others, Heritage New Zealand are a statutory agency we've engaged with. So that's really to see if there are any particular issues that they may have that they haven't communicated to date to us, because recognising we have been through 2 rounds of issues and options and seeking input and advice. The opportunity then for, I guess, all of the groups and for the general public is when the plan is notified at the proposed stage. So we're pretty confident, I think, as a team that from the earlier community engagement, we've identified the issues. The question is, have we appropriately then responded to those issues? And are there any decisions for council to make once we get to that next stage?
Thank you.
Councillor Remington.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, David. I haven't been close to this coastal plan, and it is going out for consultation. It's certainly been well canvassed here. I know, as the former chair, we went to exceptional kind of time to ensure that that Fred was included right from day one. Well done to you, and well done, Kathy, for raising it. But right through that, Fred's been right in the loop. What is disappointing that he's not here today. Where is he, Madam Chair? He was breaking his neck to come back. Do you know where he is?
Couldn't comment, don't know.
Do you know, Director May?
Through you, Madam Chair, we received an apology from Councillor Litchwick yesterday.
Disappointing. It's important, in my opinion, that this
consultation document right from the start. I find over the years, it's always hard to get a document changed. It's better off at the outset to kind of get it 90% right. And I really feel it's important that the document be an enabler, not a disabler. And what I say, this country has got, I think, the longest sea foreshore per capita probably in the world. It's massive. That's why we're great sailors. And we want to be able to have good recreational use without being kind of been inhibited. At the same time, we've got certainly areas like overfishing. I've had the witness to see the likes at Whale Bay, where persons have sugar sacks, stitching them up and just filling them with seafood and taking them ashore. And without any policing, I mean, that can't continue because they just strip rape the whole thing out. This is in Whale Bay. So that's the other extreme. Also very concerned in regard to the Maui dolphin. I mean, it's such a precious little fellow, and it's probably down to, I don't know, 50, 100 items. So that needs protection. The point I'm making is having a lifetime in advertising and marketing, often the criticism is, why didn't you tell us this is what you're doing? Now, it doesn't matter if you backflip, whatever, you'll always have that criticism. But it's the kind of the man in the street, the person in the street, the woman in the street that really I want to try and see if we can actually ensure that they do have give the opportunity to make a comment. Like the feds, or whether it's the Greenpeace, I mean, many of those have a pretty well broken record when they come in, and including the feds, may I say. But I really want to make certain we can get new submitters into this coastal plan, the draft. And what are you doing in regard to promoting it to try and encourage persons and organisations to come forward in a, not an adversarial way, but in a helpful way to present their case?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I guess we have talked previously, and David gave a potted overview of the conversations that we've been having with the community since 2019. Obviously, in the middle of that, we had some nationwide lockdowns and some challenges in terms of communicating, so we tried as best we could. When we first brought the concept of not going out comprehensively with the draft, but targeted engagement to councillors in February and then again in March, April and latterly in May at our workshops, we got the feel from the room that our targeted engagement was perhaps a little too targeted. So we'd initially started with statutory agencies. We extended that in response to some councillors, well, the direction of councillors really, and as David said, we've subsequently to a mailing list. We asked councillors at the last couple of workshops to send us anybody that they wanted to make sure were on that mailing list, and thank you to those councillors who did forward people to make sure we didn't miss them. So I think in terms of where we're at in this part of the process, we have added more to what we initially brought council in February. There's the old adage of you can lead a horse to water, and we can only do so much. We know those who are the most engaged will be the ones who make the effort, and we also know once the plan is publicly notified next year, there will be criticism that we didn't go out and talk to each person individually. That's the nature of the work that we do, but we're very confident that the program we've got lined up in the next couple of months will add another layer to the last 3 years of engagements.
That's a good response. Just a comment in regard to kind of putting man-made structures and protection and sea walls. I really don't think with rising sea levels this is going to work. I mean, I've got to give credit to the TCDC and actually alerting the residents in that area where they believe that the sea level and where the hazard zone, and it's not pretty when you come to actually read that. So I think we've got to be cautious in giving false hope to kind of creating structures that we all know that will never be affordable. let's not go down that route. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the response in regard to the marketing.
Thanks, Russ. Councillor Husband.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Jen.
I've got somebody online.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Nicol, and then I'll come to you, Stu.
Yeah, sweet.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair. I will keep it brief. Just a huge thank you to the team, considering this massive piece of work that you've been working on since at least, well, if not before 2019, as you mentioned, and how thoroughly you've taken us through the process and reiterated points. In particular to Tracy, I really feel your commitment to good process here, and more so, well, not more so, but also commitment to the environment and making sure it delivers. Raised a lot of points throughout the last 14 workshops, and as you know, it's been a big deal for me to make sure that we're doing everything we can for those extra biodiversity protections. So I'm really happy that we're going out to engage on that. And so my question, I think, has been answered, and that was just around rather than whether we put those extra biodiversity protection type methods in, or not just being a yes/no question to the people that we're talking to, but that we have lots of open questions after that to get as much information from them as possible. So I'm confident that we're going down the right path there, and yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. I would just remind councillors that at our last workshop we did include the document on marine biodiversity protection, and we have gone out in that document and said what we're seeking feedback on, and what does it mean, and we have outlined the options in that document and had made changes post our May workshop. So we're definitely not going out expecting a binary answer.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. Hi guys. Well, I'd just like to start with you, Madam Chair. I think you've done a fantastic job that have led up to it, because I've never seen a bigger time frame for a consultation document in my 9 years on council. It's bigger than Plan Change 1. So, well chaired. I mean, let's just get it out of this room and into the community if we can, really quickly. You know, it'd be really good to get it out there before I'm here. I was just wondering about the. I want to understand that you're going to bring back to us stuff, because my concern is not the coast at all. My concern is the Ramsar sites. So the Kapuatai, and to a small extent the Whangamarino, which has salt water on the other side of it. So you could almost argue that's in the coastal marine environment. But especially the Ramsar site and Thames, because every year, whether we like it or not, there's duck holes being dug in there and sold to Aucklanders to shoot them. So whether we want to hear that or not, it actually does happen. Diggers actually go in and dig big holes, rip the place apart, so they can sell them for $1,000 a day. So when are we going to come out with the rules on that? And I want to understand, is that what you're talking about by you're going to come back to us with the, you know, the stuff that's not permitted? Because to me, that's a major, you know, like if you actually Google Earth, and it's really easy, the Kapuatai, it's like you've shot a shotgun into it. So, and that you could do that anytime you like with your computers. So that needs to stop. You know, I can't believe the government have gone through, and not just this government, successive governments have gone through and just let that happen. It's like it's okay. It's okay to sell things to Aucklanders to shoot on. So that needs to stop. You know, so how we do that, if we do that on a regional level, then that's fine. Let's do it on a regional level, but let's put something in place that stops that immediately, because we're destroying those Ramsar sites. So, and farmers that surround them get the blame. So it ain't nothing to do with farmers. And in fact, this council could go to the Whangamarino and see dock huts with dock personnel's names carved into the walls, selling these huts, you know, through. So I think it's important that this regional council takes the lead on that and and I hope that's what you were saying when you're going to come back to us with permitted what's not permitted in there.
Madam Chair, just to reiterate what we said earlier, this is for the coastal marine area, so it's
Yes, I'm talking about the area where Dennis is.
Yeah, so mean high water springs out to the coast, not mean high water springs back into the land.
Okay.
That's covered by the regional plan. So the matters that you've raised, and look, mean high water springs is an arbitrary line drawn on a map for resource management purposes.
What Dennis is talking about is not part of the coastal plan.
No, that bit that is from mean high water springs out to the coast, and there is a bit of the Ramsar website that is identified as that. There is also part of the Ramsar wetland that comes back into the land. This plan doesn't address that. Our freshwater plan review will be looking at that.
I just hope it's something, because obviously I'm out of here, and I'm just hoping it's something the council picks up and really gets the bit between the teeth, because it's like our water going to Auckland. We're getting nothing back for it. We just get the Waikato's getting nothing out of it. It's a pretty raw deal for anyone who's in business. So, and the other thing was awesome on the extending the stakeholder people that you're talking to. I just a question, did you send it to the old Thames Coromandel Catchment Committee members?
I don't know, Madam Chair, we can
if you wouldn't mind flicking it, then the likes of John Sanford, the lady Morrison, there's Joe Davis. Just if we could send it up to them, it'd be good. I'm sure Joe got it in another avenue.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, Madam Chair, most of those people are pretty active in the community and likely picked up through the other groups that they are engaged with, but we will double check.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of small questions. Is 7C currently blank at the moment? Is section 7C blank?
Yes.
Right. If it's blank, then shouldn't in a consultation document, shouldn't it have the words or something to this effect, will be completed from flow from public feedback? Otherwise, somebody might interpret why is it blank. It's just, to me, a bit of a obvious comment. Just comment on that first. I've got another question.
Madam Chair, as we identified at one of the workshops,
yeah.
We will be putting out some comms collateral around this, and that is one of the matters we'll address.
Fine. And the other one was, in the interest of uniformity, are we intending to engage with all the cemeteries in adjacent to a coastal area or on a coastal area? Is that included as well?
No, Madam Chair, those areas we are required to engage with iwi on sites of importance and significance to them. It is not intended.
It's not uniform.
Right. No.
Thank you.
Just to add, Madam Chair, we are engaging with the district councils. So obviously they have cemetery responsibilities. So if they are raising any issues with us, which they have in the past, that would be the forum. No.
Councillor Strange.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to staff for all your work so far. Just had a question about Schedule 10, the financial contributions. Could you just expand on how that's developed and when, please?
Schedule 10, I'm trying to think. I don't think it has quite been developed yet, but development contributions have been in the Act, then out of the Act and back in the Act. They are basically, if a development in the coastal marine area is considered beneficial or significant enough in its benefits for it to go ahead, but it still has adverse effects, then contributions of cash or land can be taken to mitigate or offset the impacts that it is causing. It's written in the Act, and the way that it works is if we don't have anything in our plan, we cannot require that in this situation, in the chance that it might come up. It has been noticed that this has not actually been there in the current plan and it hasn't been used in the last 20 years.
Okay, so is it just a simple cut and paste from last time then, or?
It requires a bit of, we've got 20 years of amendments to the Resource Management Act, 30 years actually, and it will have to be rejigged, new wording put in, but it will accomplish pretty much what the Resource Management Act says it should.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, councillor. I think in essence, time pressures have meant that we haven't developed that schedule. There are some really good examples from other coastal plans and other regional plans as well that we're looking to, I guess, learn from. And the feedback we've had from the consenting team is that they do very much want to see a detailed schedule, which is very explicit in terms of if you're undertaking these activities, what are the circumstances in which a development contribution might be taken and what would be the quantum of that development contribution. So there's clarity up front. We believe that if we do that, for the proposed plan, that will still enable people to have their say on whether those contributions are appropriate and whether the policy is appropriate.
Okay, and so that will obviously come back to us?
Yes, it certainly will. That will come back to you at a future workshop. If not before the 30th of August, then certainly at that 30th of August workshop. And it's actually sitting on Chris's shoulders to have that done by that time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, councillors. After 14 plus workshops, we've now given another hour. I know we've given another hour to this. Everybody has had a chance to have their say. So we're going to wrap it up there. Did you want to? No, we're going to. No, I'm sorry. Everybody has had a chance to. No, everybody has had a chance to speak. Councillor Tagg, would you like to? Would you like to? Excuse me.
Your question, your motion was whether any questions. I held back discussion around.
Is there something to debate? Is there something up to debate? One point of clarification.
He's already spoken on this matter. Did you want another go at it? Your rule on that?
I'm going to rule that we've all had a chance to talk. Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Would you like to wrap up?
That's disgusting.
Madam Chair, the matters that I've got on top of those that we've
We need
already
to clarify
received,
this because that was questions.
the matters that I've got are
Happens all the time.
just making sure that the Ramsar information and detail is sorted, I guess. The next one is the making sure that we engage with those communities, particularly iwi and hapu, around the hard structures, making sure we've got good comms collateral, and looking at, as far as we're able, the Kapuatai Peak Dome. I just did want to say to councillors, look, we will be bringing the document back to you with any of the outcomes of the engagement, probably around August. As you would have seen in the timeline, we are hoping to have the document complete for Section 4A consultation with iwi before this council rises for the triennium, and that will be the finalised document, as final as we can make it. So there will be all those matters that have been talked about, Schedule 7, Schedule 10, all those matters will be in the document and it will be complete in September, all going according to plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson. Do I have a second?
Just point of order, Madam Chair. If we could consult standing orders about Councillor Tegg's question. Yeah. About the motion was not seconded, so therefore it's not on the table. I think point of order. I think the problem with this is if we don't actually get this resolved, you may have some of us actually vote against this. I think it's really important we get this right, and I'd really rather we took longer on this and enabled everybody to feel that they've had their say.
Sorry, councillor Kneebone, there is no discussion going on at the moment. I noted you said you can't hear. We've got our committee secretary just double checking a matter in regard to standing orders.
All right, we've been advised by Democracy Services that that I have ruled appropriately in regard to this. So we now have a mover and a, did we have a seconder? It was Councillor Wilmington. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? You want division? All right, division recorded. Councillor Tegg and Councillor White have voted against the matter. The motion carries. Thank you. All right. We're never going to make the 11 a.m. tea break. It's not going to happen. Thank you for that, everyone. Okay, we're moving on now to item 6, which is the draft Waikato aquaculture strategy. This is on page 22. Tracy, would you like to introduce?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is something that councillors last saw in December. We brought it to our workshops in October and November, and the comments that councillors made in regard to the strategy, we brought back to you in December. I tried to find my book with my notes from that meeting, but I know a couple of the things that were incorporated into the strategy more were the blue corridor, blue highway, the need to identify that the achievement of aquaculture within our region is not our own responsibility, that it's wider than that, and really making sure that the strategy incorporated a wellbeing approach. So we had signalled in December that we would bring it back to you for it to go out for its last round with stakeholders. You've probably well forgotten that because that's almost, well, crikey, it is 6 months ago now. But this is the version that we brought back to you in December with the comments incorporated. We are wanting to go back out. We thought it makes sense to go out and have the conversation about the draft regional coastal plan, which has the rules, and the aquaculture strategy, which is complementary to that. So David assisted us in crafting the strategy. So I will pass over to David now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair. William, we've just got a very short presentation with a couple of slides. So just to add to what the director had said, one of the other pieces of feedback was that the vision needed some recrafting. So that has occurred, and the document itself was quite lengthy. So we've taken out part 3 and reduced part 1. It's fair to say that the feedback we've received has been, I think, very good feedback, including from the aquaculture industry, from Ministry for Primary Industries, and from Thames Coromandel District Council. Thames Coromandel in particular did ask if the strategy as a draft could be presented to their elected members. So that's something we are looking at. The intention is to circulate the updated strategy for any further feedback from what we've termed the partners. So we want those key stakeholders to be buying into this strategy. And if we do get the slides up, William, we have done some initial work around how the strategy might be designed up. So we've deliberately provided you with a document that will be familiar from the end of last year. rather than a new document. This is likely how the document will end up looking. It'll be in two parts, part one and part two. Whether we have the Waikato Regional Council logo on the front will depend on the degree of buy-in we get from those partners and key stakeholders. Coupled with that, next slide please, William. Coupled with that, in discussions with Thames Coromandel's Economic Development Unit, they're very keen to see the strategy up and running. And we're actually looking at having an aquaculture forum with the same key stakeholders happening next month in July, probably in Coromandel itself. So that's something where I guess it's an opportunity to discuss the strategy and in particular to discuss how we will implement the strategy. So I think that's the key. It's all very well putting nice words on paper, but how are we going to work together with our partners to grow the industry and to achieve the updated vision. Just next slide again, William. Those are the stakeholders. Those are the organisations that we have had discussions with and we have had some feedback with. Part of the delay and the reason why you haven't heard anything for the last 6 months is because we have been engaging with iwi authorities on the strategy at the same time as we have been with the coastal plan. It's fair to say the interest has been very limited on the strategy, probably apart from Pari Hauraki. They are keen again and very supportive of the strategy, very keen to see how that will assist them in growing the industry and growing their own interests. So I think the twinning or the synergy there with the draft coastal plan is very good because you've then got the regulatory aspect of that, so you can see how some of these actions may well be implemented. And then just that little quote that I've put in there that actually came from the aquaculture industry, who are very keen on seeing the stakeholders being brought together successfully. And just last slide, William. Thank you. So those next steps, which are articulated in the agenda report, share the draft strategy, seek their formal support and endorsement, and then come back to you with a final version of the strategy, which will have some additional Te Reo elements in it, as well as obviously a version that looks more like the final version, and then the opportunity to release that. So we are looking to have that completed, fingers crossed, in the next 2 months. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so just so I'm clear, questions and comments? Councillor Strange. It's questions and comments. Councillor Strange.
Thank you, staff, for your work on the draft. Just had a quick question on page 34, issues and challenges. One of the bullet points says, mentions housing for workers. Just wondering if we could add transport for workers in as well, just for the industry to consider their travel planning as part of the overall solution.
Sorry, Councillor Strange, was that page 34 of the agenda or 34 of the document?
The document.
Page 10 of the document, page 34 of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to find the action because Thames Coromandel did raise the same issue, and as did Hauraki, around both housing and transport. So we'll certainly make sure that the transport aspect is included, as well as the action that did come from the workshop around the blue transport corridors.
Thank you. And just one thing further, if I may. Just further on in the document, it mentions funded, part funded and unfunded alongside urgencies. Is there any concern or anything we can do to assist with in that area?
Madam Chair, that was particularly put in as a result of some of the conversations from the workshop where councillors wanted to know, is this already funded? Is it funded by ourselves or funded by others? I guess we wanted to signal that a lot of what is in here is pretty much business as usual. It might be a different way of doing what we've done, but it is business as usual. But there are some items here that are unfunded, as we have mentioned before. We'll be putting up in the next LTP, a pretty comprehensive business case around the coast and marine area, which may include some of the matters in here. It may not. I guess we have a number of levers to pull ourselves, but going out and talking with our stakeholders, we're hoping to be able to gauge where there are priorities for funding, where we can have, I guess, cross-partisan talks on that. That for us, it was clearly identifying those areas where investment is needed.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor White. Oh, sorry. It's Councillor Remington first and then to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Thanks for being so inclusive in regard to the stakeholders that you've been kind of considering and negotiating with. The question I have, I didn't see on that list, although it was the early days when we were talking about fish farming, negotiating on certainly just talking to the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, and also perhaps the Sailing Club at Thames and also the one at Mercury Bay and Whitianga. The reason I say that, when it comes to permanent structures, the courses that are set for yachts can't be kind of obviously too far away, otherwise recreational kind of amateur sailors aren't that keen to be kind of sailing 10k to the start line. And you have got racing like from Auckland to Tukum, which have been over 100 years. And the same with the Mercury Bay Sailing Club, certainly not 100 years, but they're Wednesday night racing again, permanent structures in a traditional sailing boat course. It would be good at the early point to be able to get, are there any red flags at the outset, rather than having to kind of come back and try and change the plan. So Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, have they been kind of, have you consulted with them? Any sailing clubs at all? Thank you.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, the short answer is no. And the reason why is because the strategy is largely an economic development strategy with the community and with the partners and how we grow the industry. The issues around where aquaculture should be located and the type of aquaculture is the coastal plan conversation. So the issue, which certainly Yachting New Zealand has raised in the past, is to protect some of those key yachting routes, and that has come up with the Coromandel Marine Farm Zone. That was certainly part of the decisions that were made around that zone. And I understand they have also submitted on the resource consent application for Pareharaki that's due to be heard at the end of this year. So those are the examples that we do want to hear in relation to the coastal plan as to whether the areas that we've identified for new aquaculture are suitable or not. But the strategy itself has deliberately not said where aquaculture should go, just that we should be growing the industry in a suitable manner.
Oh, sorry, you've lost your light over there, Russ. Kathy, could I get you to put yours out? So
Dave, thanks for the response. But while you're saying it's industry and it's money, but also well-being and people like in recreation is a very important part of this council of the four well-beings. And I just wouldn't like to see we just think of just money, money, money. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yeah, three things that I'd like to raise. So one of them is to do with the stakeholder list as well. I do actually think it's really important that we talk to a lot of these groups. Also, just leading on from what Councillor Husband said before when he talked about the people who are on the catchment committees, especially in that Thames Coromandel area. For instance, Mike Donoghue, who was on that committee, he used to be the head honcho of marine mammal protection for DOC. He's very active in that space. So a lot of the people in that committee would be quite valuable, but especially Mike. Also just thinking that there have been quite a few people who've made submissions to the private plan change on extension of the marine farm. I just think we should have a look at who those people are and consider whether we actually want to include them on our mailing list as well. But certainly I think, you know, looking at that list of who we've received feedback from, we haven't received feedback from anybody in a recreational fishing area or environmental group. So I'm a bit concerned that we haven't actually had very good feedback yet, not very good cross-section of feedback. Also just wanted to just say one thing, and that is on page 27, where it talks about most aquaculture planning and consenting decisions are managed by local authorities under the Resource Management Act. I just wanted to make a comment there that when we were talking about that finfish farm in the last triennium, we weren't allowed to make any decisions about it at all. It was a decision that was made by the minister, my understanding. And again, that I felt that we were kind of excluded from having much say about that. And my recollection of it may be not completely accurate. So I'd like to know about that from Tracy. But all I know was when we were saying things that we felt, we were told we couldn't influence the decision had already been made. So I do think that should be pointed out if some decisions are made by the minister and not always, in terms of establishment of marine farms is what I mean. And the other thing that I did just want to ask about is page 54. Just the people that you've included there are all sort of coastal councils in terms of district plans. But I just wanted to ask a question because in the last few years, there was an issue around a carp farm application, consent application for near Taupo, and this was to do with grass carp and silver carp, created a huge amount of animosity within my community. Loads of public meetings that the consent ended up being dropped. In fact, the local energy provider ended up withdrawing their offer of land for the carp farm because of all of this. But I don't see, and you have mentioned freshwater aquaculture in here, but I don't really see freshwater spaces being included in terms of councils and groups. And I think that's really important because some of those things to do with particularly carp, silver carp, are going to be very controversial in our communities, depending on what area they're being proposed for. So just wanted to make sure that we do include district councils in areas like Taupo if this is about freshwater aquaculture as well.
Madam Chair, if I can just respond to, I guess, the second matter around the finfish farm. I think that is a good point that's been raised there, and that whilst we have, and the document's not incorrect, we do have the responsibilities under the Resource Management Act at the local authority level, but yes, the minister does have those powers where it was deemed, that area was deemed to be placed in the regional plan. So I think we can make sure to insert that reference there that the minister does have those powers to make that happen. And it was up to us to tender the finfish farming space first, and then once we had selected the successful tender, that tender was then able to apply under the Resource Management Act, and that's the matter that's outstanding at the moment. With respect to sending information to submitters on another council process, we have to be quite clean in that respect. I understand what you're saying, Councillor White, that there are people out there who are interested. We have to be very careful to be as neutral as possible. So not trying to canvass their input, but I think it is something we will look at, but we could be criticised for screwing the scrum either way. But I understand what you're saying. We've got, an engaged community out there. Let's have a look at that. So I think we'll take that away and have a think about a safe way to make that happen, if possible. With respect to the freshwater aquaculture, we do mention it in the strategy. Predominantly, this is aquaculture of a coastal nature, but we're aware that there is some land-based aquaculture occurring, and I guess where we do references in this document, we're talking about that aquaculture activity that occurs on land that ultimately supports marine aquaculture. So whether we need to be more explicit, David, in the document, I'd leave that with you for that consideration.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tracy. And through you, Madam Chair, just touching on those three main points that you've raised, Councillor. I do recall the wording around the local authorities having the consenting responsibility. I think it's actually on the MPI website, on the aquaculture page of the website, but fully recognise the Minister has those powers under Section 360 of the RMA, which is exactly what happened with the Coromandel Marine Farm zone, and also can call in through the EPA as well, significant applications. So we'll certainly make a change to rebalance that. The strategy itself did start off being both freshwater, and I think the freshwater aspect of it becomes quite difficult because it's almost a case by case. We've seen the prawn farm in Taupo essentially not work after a period of time. So there are some opportunities in the freshwater space that council may wish, or economic development agencies may wish to assist with, but largely it is very much a marine strategy, and I think as the director said, we can make that more explicit beyond just the diagram of the statutory relationships. The first question around who we're consulting with and why we've only consulted with that narrow group, that was deliberate in terms of who are the partners to the strategy and the decision not to go public. So if we do go to a wider audience, I think the questions that they will be raising will be aquaculture is appropriate here or not appropriate over there. We're concerned about these forms of aquaculture, so I'm not sure it will necessarily assist in what the purpose of the strategy is, which is to grow aquaculture in appropriate places. So that's why I'm reluctant to go out wider, because we're then essentially going through a public process, asking everyone what they think on actions which really only this council and those partners can deliver on.
I suppose my concern is it specifically references in here aquaculture and geothermal areas, and Taupo is a geothermal area. A lot of people want to make use of that geothermal power, but it's actually quite a sensitive area for a lot of reasons. And the whole issue around that carp farm was about whether there was a risk of silver carp getting into the Waikato River and what the ability might be of them to reproduce and turn into a problem like they have become in other areas. And climate change might actually make that, they're already apparently in the Waikato River, but they're, according to one of the Waikato University professors, so they're already there, but I do think that these are things that in sensitive areas, or if you're specifically going to talk about geothermal areas and people are going to want to make use of that, we need to really being cautious around aquaculture in sensitive areas. I think that's a really important thing to say.
Thank you. It's a very good point, and just looking at that action too, it was around from that almost that science perspective, investigating the feasibility and the science aspect of it, rather than going out there and saying, hey, look, this is a goer, and not dealing with those consequences and not engaging with the community and considering the environmental and long-term climate change issues. So no, good point. We'll look at that more closely. Thank you.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just make a comment that I also made at the workshop, but it's worth making again, and that is, and by the way, I'm happy to support today for this to go out for discussion with others. Thank you for the work put in so far. And that comment was mainly around the mindset applied when writing the strategy is very much in the terms of minimising adverse environmental effects and looking at the positives on some of the other well-beings, which are often the financial aspects and economy and that type of thing. what I said at the time was I'd really love to see a strategy go in the direction of not just minimizing adverse effects, but actually looking at how it will be positive for the environment as well. So just wanted to inject that again, because obviously, as Councillor White also pointed out just then, this is an area that is going to be heavily affected by climate change. And I think anything that can be done to help it be a part of the solution to that as much as possible, the industry itself would also benefit from. I'm just mindful that we've just been hearing in the news recently about the marine heat wave already causing quite a lot of job losses because of for a certain salmon farm and so forth. So there's only benefit in being able to really deeply understand that whole piece and bring that, how it's part of the solution to it as much as possible. So in particular, it's related to, say, the measures of success on page 14. In future, I'd love to see that go more in that direction of what I was just mentioning, but happy to support it today to get it out, and mindful that there are so many opinions to be pulled into one. So thank you, staff, for everything you've done.
Thanks for that, Jen. Councillor Husband.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess it's a question for Tracy. It was mentioned quite a while ago, as a layperson reading this, seems to be very circular, the submission and applicant process. So the submitters and the applicants appear on paper to be the same people. So I just want to understand how council and Parihariki are keeping themselves safe from that perceived conflict of interest that will exist in the community when this goes out. So I'm wondering how we're doing that.
Yep, sorry, just thanks, Madam Chair. It is a question, I guess, we're faced with in a number of matters, being that New Zealand's such a small country and there are a small number of players in many realms. With respect to Parihauraki, I think I can give a couple of specific examples. One was with respect to the area that the Minister deemed to be in the plan. We tendered that. We went through a fully open tender process that we engaged a specialist marine tender lawyer from Wellington to make sure that that process was as clean as it needed to be, and probably more so. With respect to the Parihauraki consent that's in at the moment, I can't speak for the process there. I'm not intimately involved in that, but I know that Brent and Amy in running the process have run it no different to the pretty tight ship that they run from consenting for any application. In regard to the private plan change that Parihauraki are progressing through at the moment, we have contracted that out to external advisors. We are able to recoup the full cost of that, as it's a private plan change. So that has gone out to external advisors who are not advising us on the regional coastal plan, nor have advised us on this aquaculture strategy. So it's very important for us to keep that separation. Now, the private plan change and the consent hearing for the resource consent will converge probably around July and August, and I understand that the team are presently looking at who is able to hear that consent. I don't know, and we can find out for council who will hear that. It may be a mixture of independent advisors and councillors, I'm not sure, or it may just be independent advisors. From my perspective, we are very clear with any iwi group, I guess, not just Parihauraki, what hat we have on when we are talking to them and what conversation we are having. That doesn't necessarily mean that the same comes back at us, because usually if we go and talk to iwi and get the opportunity, then everything will be popped in together. But we are keeping things very clean, very clear. We are also pushing back where like any good economic investor is trying to push for their own line in any particular document, we're going back to our role and responsibility to this council. So those are a couple of examples of where we are keeping things where the probity of matters and the transparency, I think, is very clear.
Okay, so for me, I had a whole heap of words there, but I didn't actually get what I was looking for out of it. So I'm not Stu Husband, the councillor sitting around this table. I'm Bruce, the farmer, Tao Hay reading the newspaper or reading this document when it comes out. For me as a layperson, which I try to put a lens on it as a layperson, I see simply the submitter, the stakeholder, and the submitter are the applicant. And that's all I see. So I'm wondering how, and please take iwi out of it, make it federated farmers, for argument's sake. I see the submitter and stakeholder deciding on it, and the applicant as the same group, even the same name. So my question is, does the minister know that that's happening? Because there's a lot of heat around this at the moment with conflicts. So does the minister know this? Or what? I just really, it was asked a couple of months ago or a few months ago. I've had no answer, and I'm asking it again. Because as a layperson seeing this, there's going to be an uproar when this comes out. So I'm wondering, how is council going to stay safe out of this? And I know we're going to stay neutral and all that, but perceived, we're all talking about perceived here. And it's not Stu Husband, the councillor, because I fully understand it and I fully get it. It's Bruce, the farmer.
Madam Chair, this is not an unusual situation. This happens all the time, where we have people who both submit on plans and who are consent applicants to plans. Couple of things I'd like to say. The decision is, there have been indications where they are, there have been examples where they're both. What I want to be very clear on is any policy document that has been developed, we go out and talk to stakeholders. The decision is yours here. It is not the stakeholders. We seek their input, we make the decisions. Now, many of those stakeholders become submitters, some even become applicants. Plan Change 1 is a classic example. So for me, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do. Whether it's iwi, whether it's federated farmers, we are always running into people who are sitting at the table that we're talking to at different stages with different hats on. What I would say is trust the process and trust the advice that staff are giving you to ultimately make the decision. I don't see any, I understand the perception, but I just want to give council the reassurance that we have processes in place to make sure that those things are treated separately.
Just me personally.
Sorry, they're not going to hear you online.
It's just, I'd like a robust, I'm already getting hammered on this stuff. Okay, so I'd like a robust answer from staff that I can give, not trust the process to Bruce the farmer, because I'll probably get a punch in the eye. I want a robust answer that I can give people and say confidently, this is council's direction, this is why we're keeping safe, this is how we're doing it. If I could get that, I'm happy. Because again, it's not me asking, it's the community.
Madam Chair, I think what would be of benefit is a memo that is prepared that outlines the different matters of the jigsaw and where our processes are helping or not.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
I was thinking about Stu's question. I would have thought part of the response you might give, Stu, is that you've sat around this table and listened to councillors hammering vested interest. Well, I've certainly heard it around this table. So I don't think they've been given an easy ride through this strategy. But anyway, that wasn't my question, Madam Chair. Kathy, I hadn't thought about that, hadn't applied my mind to the freshwater aquaculture, and it's a great point you make. And when I read the document, it's pretty light on detail. I get the impression from your questioning that you would be looking for something that's permissive of land-based aquaculture. Is that where you were going with your question? So that was the first question really of you, Kathy. The second question in my mind is, why don't we just call this a draft marine aquaculture strategy and remove the sideshow that could develop? Because, you know, it's entirely likely people may want to have a kura farm in Taupo, and you know, we could really bog what I think is a great document. Inadvertently, we haven't shown the sort of breadth and depth of thinking around land-based aquaculture. But if we just call it a draft marine aquaculture strategy, home and host. But I do think we need to note Kathy's concerns that it didn't afford enough commentary and protection in its current form for her constituency. That's the impression I was getting from Kathy's commentary.
Through you, Madam Chair, that was exactly what I had written down. Perhaps if we relabelled it a marine aquaculture strategy, but also having some narrative in there that connects back to freshwater aquaculture and the challenges of that. I think the signal I'm getting is go through and do a check, just to make sure that it does have that coastal and marine focus. And councillors, if we go back to the whakapapa of the document, it's from the RPS where it has very clearly got a coastal and marine focus. So I think if we go, the renaming of it crystallises that focus, but also go back through noting where the document refers to land-based aquaculture and just double checking those references and being very explicit about the focus of the document is on marine or land-based aquaculture that supports marine aquaculture.
Is that okay? So yes, I do think it should be less permissive. And I don't think our consenting process actually protects a lot of these areas. That's what concerns me. That, you know, basically we end up with a situation where individual councils issue individual consents, and so does DOC, and nobody ever really talks properly about what the concerns are. And quite often I've discovered that people in other organisations like NIWA and the university have concerns around these kinds of things, and they only come out when you get to the point of something like your community having an uprising, which is what happened in Taupo. The public halls were, you know, full to the brim, and people were angry, and we got all through that process, and then, you know, it ended up not being councils and consenting processes that ended it. It ended up being a private organisation deciding that they didn't want to do something that wasn't supported by their community, and they withdrew their offer of land. And then the applicant decided he'd made a mistake of actually including both grass carp and silver carp in his application, and he decided to withdraw. But what I'm trying to say is consenting processes didn't protect it. That isn't what, you know, so what I'm saying is this aquaculture strategy, I don't believe protects those kinds of situations or sensitive areas either. And so that's where my concern is. I think we are too permissive. And basically, you know, a consent applicant puts in something that says, oh, there are 0 adverse effects from this. We've already done our risk assessment, and we kind of accept that, and we grant consents. But actually, there are a whole load of people out there who have the knowledge, the scientists who have the knowledge, who say, actually, there are big risks with it, and I don't think it should go ahead. So, yeah, I'd like it to be less permissive.
All right. How are we going to incorporate all those comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. Look, I think the key directions that we made comments we've captured the notes from the conversation, but the two directions are to crystallise the focus on the marine aquaculture strategy, to go back and see where we refer to land-based aquaculture in sensitive areas or just generally, to, I would suggest, remove those references or be very explicit in the start of the document that it doesn't refer to those freshwater aquaculture activities that are outside supporting coastal and marine aquaculture. I would just like to respond in terms of the change needed to the regional plan will be to the regional plan and not the regional coastal plan to address the matters that Councillor White has raised. Being that we've got a coastal plan, a freshwater plan review, the chances of getting to a plan that will address, getting to a process that will address those matters, we're at least 4 to 5 years away. So I just want to be very, very clear with councillors. But I think it's a good point if we're going out consulting concurrently on the draft coastal plan and the aquaculture strategy, let's not include something that's actually related to the regional plan. So, Madam Chair, on that, I think I'd like to...
Why don't you think about if we need some additional words in that, in the recommendations that's before us, because we have Councillor Kneebone with a hand up online. So we'll go to you, Stu. Can't hear you, Stu.
Sorry, I was just panicking to find the blimmin' mute. Look, thank you. Look, I'm happy with putting this out, noting the proposed, well, what you've just spoken about, Tracy, in terms of amending things a little bit or reinforcing particular points. And I'll just point out that it's a strategy. It's not a set of plan rules or anything like that. So just noting what you were concerned about, Kathy. So yeah, just want to make that point. Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Stu. All right. Is there something you would look at you furiously writing, crafting? Literary genius over here.
Okay, I'm not sure about that.
Just wondering if there's anything we need to add in here to reflect the renaming of the strategy and the incorporation raised earlier.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so in terms of the recommendation that's before the committee, I think 1 and 2 stand. I would put A2A in, noting that the strategy be reworded to be the draft coastal marine aquaculture strategy or something along those lines, and also noting that the matters related to land-based aquaculture be amended to reflect the discussion had and direction provided by the committee. Can you just put your microphone on?
I just wonder if the words should be, will, any reference to land-based aquaculture will be only in support of marine aquaculture. That's what we're trying to say, isn't it? So it doesn't allow a freshwater fish farm to sneak under the radar, for example.
Yes, I'm just trying to craft that at the same time as think. So that the document's reworded to the draft marine aquaculture strategy and that the document is amended so that it focuses on coastal marine aquaculture and land-based aquaculture associated with this only.
We're having trouble keeping up with the suggested wording that's coming through, getting it on the screen. Just want to test, are you guys, are councillors happy that that the intent
is needed to focus on Land-based
reported in our
aquaculture.
reporting. Right, we'll get it right.
Aquaculture.
Noting though? Or 2A, it should say
Sure.
no.
And that the document be renamed. No, I think, James, it's just 2A starts with that the document be renamed.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, just while you're working on that, I've just done a word search of land-based and freshwater. So there are only 2 actions that relate to land-based aquaculture.
Marine aquaculture strategy, comma.
Yep. Yep.
And focuses on.
No, I just happy with the changes. I just wanted to note that it was around opportunities, because originally the brief for this was much larger than just marine. But yeah, comfortable, particularly given the stakeholders who we're engaging with, that is narrowed.
Land-based agriculture associated with this owner. Only, we'll tidy it up. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, so it's that action and the one above that are the only 2. The rest of marine.
You're keeping.
All right. We've got the wording there on recommendation.
Small matter. I don't think the word focuses really is appropriate. It should be relates to or encompasses or something like that, because focus is just, it doesn't do it for me.
Includes.
Yep. Includes, so some just small.
Includes and get rid of all.
Yeah, that's a good point, Madam Chair. Just, sorry, while yourself and the Director were looking at the wording, myself and Councillor White were just noting the 2 actions that relate to land-based aquaculture. I think the rest of the context is almost there. If we remove those 2 actions out of the strategy.
Yep.
And B, sorry, if we can have a B. Just so we've explicitly captured, sorry, just so that we've explicitly captured it, that the 2 actions related to land-based aquaculture in sensitive environments be removed.
So can I just ask, so would you be removing on page 46, would you remove that whole action? So just take out including geothermal energy sources? Okay, so you just have investigate
Sorry, for those
utilising.
online, we're just trying to get the wording right.
So investigate utilising low-grade heat from industrial processes for land-based freshwater aquaculture. Is that what you're saying? Just remove the including.
Sorry, what I heard was that we didn't want the references to freshwater in there to have actions around freshwater. So that's why I was suggesting we take them out.
Yeah.
Because it may be other sources that have the exact same outcomes that Councillor White's concerned about. But certainly those are the sorts of initiatives that the industry are very keen to support.
So, councillors.
So would you just remove the bit where, so it would become land-based aquaculture and you'd remove the freshwater word on page 46? Is that what you're saying?
So, councillors, we've got a recommendation up there, 2A and 2B.
I don't think we have 2B. Correct.
Be removed.
You removed.
Yep. We will make sure we know what the intent is. This is crafting on the fly. We will flesh it out a bit more, and we will draw your attention to that when these minutes go through. Yeah.
All right, we've got a mover and Councillor McPherson. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Quayle, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. It is 11:21. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 11:30, which is a 9-minute break. I'm shortchanging y'all.